Today we got a great show for you today, man. Someone I'm really excited to speak with. Retired NYPD homicide detective, then turned ATF Deputy Assistant Director, Pete Forcelli. You guys may know the name. He's also the author of the book, The Deadly Path. Pete was the whistleblower for Fast and Furious. If any of you guys remember that in the news that came out. Pete, in my opinion, is an American hero. He's someone that should be a household name. I don't know if we do enough to honor people who stand in integrity in this country or even in our law enforcement profession. So, it's an honor and it's a pleasure for you to join us and take your time out of your day, Pete, to speak with us. So, let's just get started, Pete. If you want to introduce yourself and just get into it, where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up? What made you get into law enforcement?
I grew up in the Yonkers, Bronx area. Went to Catholic school because my parents actually wanted me to get an education. The schools kind of sucked. Young, started watching a lot of cop shows back in those days with Starsky and Hutch. And then there was some like quasi cop shows like Beretta and whatnot, Kojak. So I was kind of enamored with policing from a really young age because I thought that shit was real. I thought TV was how it was. And then it's funny because I lived in a pretty bad neighborhood in Yonkers, New York, which is just north of the Bronx. And I was outside one day when Yonkers police narcotics got involved in a shooting at a housing project right across the street from the house I grew up in. And I remember it was like just being intrigued by like the crime scene tape being up there and all the craziness going on. And the only people that can get past that tape were the cops. So it was kind of like cool to see that, hey, those were the guys who kind of knew what was happening. They had control of the scene. So that just continued, man. I took the test to become an NYPD cop when I was in high school. I went to a trade school, learned how to be a carpenter. So I took 4 hours a day of like history, science, English, and then 4 hours a day of carpentry. I was a shitty carpenter, to be honest with you. You would never want to hire me to do any fine cabinetry. I could put up walls and stuff like that. Okay. Took the test in 10th grade because back then you could be 16 and a half to take the NYPD test. I did.
What year was that?
1983 or 82 even. I'm not sure. Took it at the Taft High School in the Bronx. So, got the notification that I passed. And, when I graduated high school, I contemplated joining the military, but then there was part of me that was like, hey, I know I have this passing score and I don't want to be stuck overseas So Saunders High School. So then what happened is I waited till I was old enough to take the job, did some, odd and ends carpentry work until then. So I got on at age 20, which I know that's no longer the age where you can get on. It was funny because the day I showed up to get sworn in, I got sent up to the 14th floor. Everybody else went into this big auditorium and I was like, oh, geez, what's going on? And that's when I found out I was actually going to be a housing cop. So started with housing police. Best job I ever had. Ever was being a housing cop. I was disappointed when I originally got the job, but the people I worked with were amazing. And it was a smaller job. So the captain knew your kids' names. You knew the captain's kids' names. It was like a family. So I was on patrol there for probably about 5 years, uniform patrol. First couple of years walking a beat, which was awesome. I know that's not a big thing anymore. Got into the sector car, R&P, responding to jobs. Enjoyed that too. Went into anti-crime. Then got interviewed, went into the detective bureau, still housing. And then Giuliani came along and merged housing with the NYPD. So I originally wound up in the 47th Precinct Squad, which was good timing because that was a year when it was 95. The 4-7 led the city in homicides that year. So a good place to learn, work with some great detectives. Eventually got asked to go into the Bronx Homicide Task Force. So I was there for about 4.5 years, almost 5 years. And it was around the time where the city finally acknowledged that they had a gang problem. Because for years ago, we don't have a gang problem. You see guys with the bandanas, you see guys with gang colors, but no, we don't have a gang problem. So that's when I really started working with feds. Like did a couple cases with FBI. Okay, good organization.
This is while you're in the 4-7?
No, this is when I finally went to Bronx Homicide.
This is when you're in homicide. Okay.
Yeah. So we worked a lot with ATF, DEA, and FBI. FBI's culture didn't really attract me. It's kind of, I don't mean to offend any FBI folks that are listening, but kind of like very structured, almost like tight ass. I found that the DEA and ATF folks were a lot more like we were, just regular knuckle draggers going out there doing what they had to do. And so I spent some time there and jumped ship, and then became an ATF agent in 2001. So I vested. I didn't do the full 20. And then I had a pretty long career with ATF. Did 21 years. I was an agent in New York for 6 years. Was a supervisor in Phoenix for 5. Got thrown out of Arizona, which we could talk about later. After that whole Fast and Furious mess. So that was 2012. Went to headquarters, which sucked for about 6 months. Went up to Canada for 2 years. Freaking awesome assignment. Canadian cops are amazing. And they live up to their reputation when it comes to drinking, belly up to the bar. Good people. Did 2 years up there, back to headquarters. Then I was sent down to Miami. I was the assistant special agent in charge, which is like the number 2 of the office for a while. Then I got promoted and I ran the office. So I was down there for the Parkland shooting, the Pulse nightclub shooting, for the Fort Lauderdale airport mass shooting. Then they got booted back up to headquarters, and I rounded out my last 4 years, almost 5. At first I was the deputy assistant director over East Coast operations, which was a cool job. But me and the field ops boss, like my immediate supervisor, he liked Yes Man. I wasn't Yes Man. So I was offered a lifeboat and sent down to run training, because training was a little bit of a shit show. And the person that was running that director was a solid guy, great agent. And he asked me to come down to, to work with him. And I did. So it was great. Because by that time, man, I was ground down. So to go down to the academy, because I always saw that as well, and just see the young agents coming in that really just wanted to go out there and do the job, it kind of kept me going in the last few years of the job. But 35 years, man, I love the profession. I love the work, but it was time to go, man. So now I'm a retired guy, and I still try to talk to law enforcement folks about leadership and about doing the right thing and about the importance of taking care of yourself, because this job takes a lot out of you. And, people come into this profession whole, they deserve to leave whole, So, but no, it's been a good run.
So Pete, you flew through your career like it was like this, bro. But you had a crazy, intense career, man. Like from the start of it, even from in the NYPD days, like you're in the height of violent crime in New York City. So I want to take you back now, because I want to know more about you, dude. Okay. I read your book. It's honestly, it's infuriating to read. I'm not gonna lie. I found myself like having bouts of anger and like being, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe what happened. But before we even get there, I just want to know, Pete Forcelli. Pete's in high school. He's in a tough neighborhood in Yonkers. What type of students, Pete? How are you?
Oh man, I was a solid C student, brother. School was not my thing. It's weird. I actually did very well in English, and I did very well in history. I loved history. Math, man, which, when you're in high school, you say, I don't need this shit. When you get older and you're actually trying to make money and do certain things, you actually learn, hey, man, I wish I would have paid more attention to some of that math stuff. But, look, again, I took carpentry 4 hours a day. So it was, fun stuff. But yeah, was I a great student? No, I was good at, relating to people and just having fun. I wasn't the best kid. Drunk beer in the park and ran away from the cops. Never did anything where I got, into any trouble or hurt anybody. But I wasn't an angel growing up. I had fun, Yeah,
no, I mean, I think that's, the reason I ask you that, because I think that's most cops, right? I think like, yeah, mischievous people,
right,
but not totally bad people, like good people, hold the door for old ladies, respect old men, maybe a little funny in class, got in trouble sometimes, but but not but I just it's just curious, because and then I think now when I look at you could say, I could easily say that you're a scholar, right? You're an author, you wrote a book, and maybe your teacher wouldn't have saw that for Pete Forcelli, right? Yeah. Forcelli going forward. So all right. So you're like, I want to do a different career. I either want to be a carpenter or I want to be a cop. You become a cop. You go to housing pre-merger. What was New York City like at that time, and what was that transition for you? Was it much of a transition? Like how'd you feel like stepping into Bronx housing? Or did you love every second of what was that for you?
Well, I mean, look, it's an adjustment, because you're going from being a kid, right, with no responsibilities other than trying to make enough money to put gas in your car and pay the rent that you had to pay to keep your parents. I was living in my parents' house at that point. It was a gift, because I came on. I was a young kid, man, 20 years old, maybe even too young if you look back. I wasn't doing stupid shit on the job, don't get me wrong, but I had these old timers that just couldn't wait to teach me the job. And, when you think about it, man, like that's a gift, because you just absorb all of that knowledge. And that's the stuff that keeps you alive. It's not what you learn in the academy, man. It's what you learn from people who have walked the walk, so to speak. So, I mean, I was blessed to learn from some patrol cops who did over 20 years in uniform. There were some housing cops that just, they had no inclination to promote. They liked walking the beat. Some of them liked walking the beat because of some of the stuff that happened behind closed doors in the projects. Some of the old timers, they had girlfriends and whatnot. But it was just a great place to learn. And again, it was a smaller department, and the rules were a little bit less, because I remember back then, this was around the time that Eddie Byrne was killed. And I remember if you were a uniformed cop in New York at the time, it was frowned upon to make drug arrests. In housing, that's pretty much all we did. So, I mean, there were a lot of collars to be made. You learn real early on that your mouth is your best weapon. So, the person you're arresting today, if you treat them like a gentleman or late gentle lady, they're more likely to give you information down the road. So, I mean, it was just a great place to learn. But the violence was off the hook. Crack had just kind of hit New York City. That's when TNT and all those units were formed to push back after Eddie Byrne's murder. So it was just, I guess, baptism by fire,
And how would you say the morale of the department was at that point, and the camaraderie?
Oh, it was unbelievable. We were family, And look, even the NYPD cops, because obviously shit would happen in the projects at NYPD would come in. Mostly the 43rd precinct we dealt with the most often in the area of the Bronx I worked. It was family, I mean, we all got along. The morale was good. And then look, there was stuff that happened because it's a different era. Let's say you worked a 4 to 12. Well, you were out at the bar drinking with the cops from the precinct, with the EMTs, from firefighters, from midnight to 4 a.m, sometimes past 4 a.m. So, I mean, it was just a community, and we respected each other. We looked out for each other. And, people always talked about the thin blue line and all of this bullshit, especially lawyers, the DAs. Oh, you cops all stick together. No one sticks together more than lawyers, I've learned. But, I mean, that wasn't the case, man. We didn't tolerate stupidity amongst our peers. It was just a matter of, supporting each other. It was again, it was like being part of a gigantic family.
And what'd you think about, how was the discipline at that time also? As far as uniform, being shaved, wearing your hat, what was that like? Was there a real emphasis on that? Or how would you describe that type of behavior from the department down? What was that?
Oh, no, there was this, and listen, even housing, but I mean, I saw it in my NYPD peers at the time too. I remember one time standing roll call, and we had inspections. There was 2 people for housing, for the entire department, because it was only a 2,500 person department. I remember one time this guy came, Lieutenant Jones was his name. He looked like the guy from you probably remember, he looked like the villain from the James Bond movie Live and Let Die. Bald, tall, African-American guy. And he had a henchman, a fat white guy that came around with him. And I remember he got down on his knees and flicked a pencil under my heel, and literally was going to ding me for that. My heel and my shoes was too worn out in the back, because you're a young cop, you're not worried about it. So I mean, that's the level. One time he actually complained I didn't have my pen and pencil holder on my belt. I don't know that anybody really wore them. I was really thin at the time. I couldn't fit the freaking thing on my belt. So I mean, they cared. You couldn't have your hair touching your collar. If you were a guy, if you were a woman, you had to have it up in a bun. We had to wear the trousers with the stripe on the side. But I mean, I took pride in the uniform because I really loved the job. But yeah, there were times where they were strict, and there were times where, I should have bought new shoes. Never wore the white socks. I know some folks went with the white socks look. Not him. No, that's Yaphet Kodo, was the other guy. I think his last name was Holder. But yeah, so it was a fun place. But yeah, there were standards, and you wanted to meet that standard. I don't like what I see today when I visit New York. The cops dress like elevator mechanics. Forgive me.
No, I get what you're saying, man. The uniform's dirty, it's sloppy, it's messy. They're not shaven, they're not clean shaven, they're not groomed. Not everybody, because I see guys that are in shape, that are groomed, that the uniform's neat. But when you look overall, if you just take a look, I mean, that the majority are that's a cop.
Yeah, we had to wear the 8-point hats too. So I mean, if you didn't have your hat on, you'd get dinged.
And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because I hear a lot of complaints today from the young cops that they're like, oh, they're hammering us for all this little stuff. And I'm like, well, that kind of always went on. I'm like, the problem is you guys don't have any morale and you don't have any camaraderie. And so like you said, they're doing things they would never do today, right? If I was checking people's heel, forget about it. You get an OEO and that's not happening today. It's not to that level. But that is a real micromanaging level as far as uniform appearance. And yet you sat here and you said it was great. Morale was great. You were a family. You were part of it. You felt like you were part of a family. You were part of an organization, and you understood why those things were happening. And I think we kind of lost that today. So let's go a little further now. Prior to you making detective, you're doing anti-crime. Are you interested in becoming a boss at that point, or are you looking to go to the detective route? What's your goal as you're a younger cop, you're doing anti-crime, you're out there making arrests. Like, what are you looking to do at this point in law enforcement?
I still just wanted to be a good cop and prove myself to my peers. I had no desire to enter into leadership. Candidly, even later on in my career when I went to ATF, I didn't want to be a boss. I loved investigations. I loved doing the job itself. Like, I didn't envision myself to have any management skills or leadership skills at all. It's just that I really loved the job, to go out there, especially later on when I got into the Detective Bureau at Homicide, solving those cases where you bring justice to the families. It was rewarding. But, again, it's also a team effort. Like, so when you're solving a homicide case, it's not you, it's the folks you're working with. And, like I was saying, even when we talked about being on patrol, when I got into the Detective Bureau, like I spent a short period in the 4-5 squad. The next youngest guy in the squad to me, I was 27. The next youngest guy was 53 years old. I remember walking into the squad room my first day, and you could smell the scotch in the air, right? It smelled like mothballs, Old Spice. Like, just smelled like old people. And at first I'm like, oh, this is going to suck, man. I got nothing in common with these guys. But the reality was, man, that, look, a lot of them were old timers they were around in the Serpico days. No shit. So, but some of them, they wanted you to be successful. So, like, if they had a big case, they knew how to work it, but they wanted you to get the credit for it. So, there were times where I'd work these homicide cases and these old timers would mentor me through it. And just to be able to absorb that knowledge of these guys that had decades of experience was a gift that to this day I still try to pay back. So that was just amazing. But so it turned out I had a lot more in common with those old timers than I thought I did. And we went out, we drank, again, different generations sitting at the bar talking about cases, talking about life. Great experience.
Before you become a detective, though, what would you say your mindset is going to work every day? Like, how was that? Like, you're a young cop. Like, what was your mindset? Like, what were your goals every day? Like, when you were going out there, and did you take that home with you? Was it your entire life, the job? Like, what was that?
Yes and yes. Look, it was about I just wanted to go out there and make collars. And I'll stupidly admit that I thought the cool thing was to try to get a rack of medals. Like, I thought, well, if you have more medals, it shows that you're a good cop. That's actually not true, especially when half the time luckily I didn't write myself up for a lot of them, but I know people that wrote themselves up for hundreds of medals. I'm like, well, how great is it if you had to recommend yourself for the medal? But look, I was a horrible father, and look, when I was in anti-crime, I wasn't a father yet. My daughter was born the same month I went into the Detective Bureau. But I was married. I didn't have that presence at home. I was so into the job that, I just really wasn't a very good husband, wasn't a very good father later on. The only thing that I made a point every day to go to the gym. That was my, where I kept my head straight, was going to the gym for a couple hours. I was a gym rat. And then I'd go to work. I'd show up for work early, like an idiot, and stay there late, sometimes not even putting in for the overtime because I just loved the job. If I worked for more than an hour late, I'd put in. But if I worked like a half an hour, that was on me, stupid, in hindsight. But I also love my team, man. I work with some really good people. So it's like, you didn't want to let them down, So, it was fun. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. And how is that, like, being a homicide detective? How is it? How do you like, obviously you're dealing with death all day as opposed to the squad where you're dealing with a wide variety of different cases. Like, how would you say you handled that as a human, just as a regular person? Was it a thing for you, or was it like, I'm in the movies, I don't really know these people? Like, how'd you deal with that?
Kind of a little bit of both, to be honest with you, because you got to put up a wall because you're seeing stuff like the cases that bother you is like the helpless people. Because a lot of the murders we dealt with were shitheads who got killed by other drug dealers. So, you still work those cases as hard as you could. But the thing that bothers you is like when it's an old person. Like I remember one case where a woman was like, we believe she was hit with a meat cleaver or an axe, which left the scene in a 4-5 during a burglary. She came out of the shower, right? And then there were the babies. Like I had one case, a kid named Joseph Dalphin. He was 4 years old. The kid shit himself. He was handicapped, mentally handicapped. And he was being babysat by the stepfather. And what happens is stepfather changes the kid. The kid had diarrhea, instantly shits himself again. The guy goes into a rage and beats this kid to death and then took the kid to a park and basically tried to stage a scene like the kid fell off the swing. But literally took this baby to his father's house. Hey, the baby's sleeping, put the kid in the bed, picked the kid up. Hey, Dad, I got to go. Took him to the park. This happened in the Edenwald Project. And so what happens is they rush this kid to the hospital. The first thing they check is the kid's body temperature, and the emergency room folks are like, what happened? Like at first they thought that he drowned, like his body temperature was so low they thought he was in water or something. But anyway, they report it. We show up at the emergency room. Clearly the kid didn't drown. So we got a confession, and that's exactly what happened. The kid shit himself. The guy got upset, changed him, did it again, beat this kid to death. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that sticks with you, is the kids and the old people, the defenseless people, and obviously the cops when it happens with the cops. But the thing for me in the homicide squad, like my experience was a little bit different than the guys who worked homicide all the time, is because, like I said, this is around the time where the city started to acknowledge they had a gang problem. So, I was in the homicide squad during a period where Al Matarazzo was the chief of detectives, and he was a great boss. I mean, just phenomenal boss. So what happened was we started to work federal cases as homicide detectives. And my first case was this case called the sex, money, murder case. And what happened was to get into that case, we took a guy who had a previous gun arrest, and he was a felon. So we were able to charge him federally. And then he came in and flipped and gave a lot of information. So the light bulb went off in his head. It doesn't happen very often, but I had this moment where the light bulb went off. I said, wait a minute, if we can get this guy to flip because he's going federal, why not try doing it with other folks? So we started this program. Again, it was Chief Matarazzo, myself, our Lieutenant Sean O'Toole, my partner Benny. We came up with this concept at a restaurant in Brooklyn called Two Toms, where we're like, hey, why don't we just start doing these felon in possession cases and flip these people and start building RICO cases? So Chief Matarazzo could have said, no, you're out of your mind. You're not doing that, because he's the kind of boss he was. He's like, yeah, let's try it. So we did. And we started this program. First year, we arrested like 13 people, built the sex, money, murder RICO case, came out of that. By the final year I was in NYPD, we had over 174 trigger lock arrests for the Bronx in 1 year. And man, we were closing murders. And these were murders from years ago, because when you're going to federal jail, you're not going to sit in Rikers Island, see people from your neighborhood and come out in 45 days. These people, for just having a gun, were doing 4 or 5, and if they had multiple felonies, sometimes 15 plus years. And it could be in Lompoc in California or Sandstone in Minnesota. So they were shitting their pants. So they wanted to offer up everything. So we were able to build a ton of cases and then spin-off cases off of these low-level gun cases. And it was really doing that kind of made me realize, like, why am I a Bronx cop? I love the job. I love the NYPD. Me and my lieutenant didn't always get along very well. He had favorites. I wasn't one of them, which is fine. But that's when I realized, hey, man, like I could have a better impact as a Fed instead of taking all these cases to the Bronx DA's office where they plea bargained everything down. And that's why, like, said about 4.5 years into my time with the NYPD Homicide Squad, I decided to jump ship. But it was a good experience. I love the job. I love the people I work with. It's just that one rub was like, I didn't feel like I could really be very effective with the folks at the Bronx DA's office. They were good. They had full plates too. So I'm not going to entirely blame them, but that's why I bailed. I felt like I could be better. Regret it, man, because the federal pensions suck compared to NYPD pensions.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because it's the NYPD pension's real good, and it's not often that you see a guy that's in homicide not do 30 years or 25 years or something. But I think you went in homicide pretty young.
I did,
and I think that might be the cause of that too. I think that might have been starting to rub you. But so that's what I wanted to get up to. So you kind of brought us there. So what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying that at 15 years, you don't feel like you're that effective, and you're looking at the feds and you're like, if I was over there, because you were working with them, I could be more effective at closing cases and get more stuff done. So there was an interest to be a Fed. That's why you left, because the federal pension sucks compared to, you would have made a lot more money if you did that additional 21 years in the NYPD.
Well, that's a huge part of it. And look, like I said, I wasn't my lieutenant's favorite. There were people getting put in for grade. I didn't see that happening for me because I would butt heads with my lieutenant. We had a love-hate relationship. And there were people like the girl who used to put the photos in the photo book. That was her only job. Like if we arrested somebody, she created photos. She got put in for grade. So his informants got put in for grade. That was cool, whatever, the house mice, so to speak. And so I'm looking at the feds I was working with. Were making captains pay without working crazy overtime. They were home for the holidays. And I was like, they were living, they used to call it a gentleman's life. Pete, come on over here. We live a gentleman's life. And here, for me to make that kind of money, man, I was grinding it out. I never saw my kids. My kids should have called me Uncle Dad. I saw them maybe on Sundays. Because to make a living back then, you had to work a lot of overtime. So it's like, hey, wait, I can leave and make captain's pay, right? Or I could stay here and grind it out and not see my kids. But again, the impact too, man. Like here I'm grinding it out and nobody's really staying in jail, or they always wanted a little bit more. Where with the feds, man, the U.S. Attorney's Office, they never said no to me. They never said, no, we're not going to prosecute it. There were times that I came in, we want a little bit more, but it was never a hard no. Because there are people that I investigated for murders that I know they did it, that the Bronx DA's office never would give the green light on, and when I left, some of those cases are still open.
Well, I mean, obviously, what do you think the difference between you and an ATF agent is? And I don't want you to knock the ATF or anything, but like you come in with this homicide experience, with this NYPD experience, with a long, lengthy background policing the streets in New York City. Do you think that was a negative becoming a Fed? Do you think that was a great positive? Like, what would you think if I just went directly into the ATF, or if I had your background? Do you feel like you came in with a wealth of knowledge? Like, how do you feel your experience helped you or hindered you? Like, what was that?
Well, I'll tell you a couple stories. Like when I first came over to ATF, I had a case that I started with the NYPD called the Bellow case. It was a guy, his name kept coming up in home invasion robberies. So again, that trigger lock program, he got caught with a gun in the Bronx in the lobby of a building with another guy that had two guns. So we suspected he was a home invader. We were able to build this case. Eventually the case wound up, with 145 home invasion robberies, 6 murders, some kidnapping. Great case. Had some spin-off cases as well. So, but what happened is I at the point, we just had this guy and he had proffered once. So here I start as a brand new ATF agent. I show up at my office. My boss was this guy named Jerry Raffa, old school ATF guy, loved cops. So I tell him, hey, boss, I got this case, right? I'm not even through the academy yet. So I think this case is going to involve a bunch of home invasions. I said, can I work it? Because Sean O'Toole, my lieutenant in Bronx Homicide, didn't care about the case because it wasn't a murder case. He's like, yeah, if you want to take it, take it. So I took it. So I was expecting the boss to say, are you out of your mind? There's no way I'm going to let you, a rookie agent, open up this case. Instead, it was like, Pete, you were a cop, run with it. So here I come in with a case that's already kind of in its infancy that turns out to be like a 3-year long case, great case. So I mean, they trusted me because they respected my experience, which I give them credit for as an agency, that they would respect police experience, because other ATF agents come on with similar experience from different departments, and there were quite a few NYPD guys who come in. Like for example, right now the executive assistant director of ATF was a street crimes guy who worked with Louis Savelli doing Bronx gang stuff, Bobby Cicada. So, all good stuff. Now, I worked with a couple of agents. One of them I actually mentioned in my book, this guy, Joe Slatala. Joe came right out of college and was a phenomenal agent. So, I mean, I think it helped to have that experience, but I've seen people come in with no experience and thrive. But then there's some people who just, look, there's a different mindset with some feds, right? And some of them, it's just they come in and they realize, hey, man, I got a federal government job. It's hard to get rid of me. I'm going to do the bare minimum. So I saw a lot of that too as an agent, and then later on as a manager. You had some folks that were killing it. And then you had some folks who were basically on, I guess a subsidized form of welfare, where they knew they were going to get a check whether they worked hard or not.
Yeah, I mean, you get that in the NYPD too, right? There's people that want to just come to work, put their uniform on, drive around, waste gas, and then that's about it. And They don't even really want to do that too much, So, I mean, that's always, I think you're always going to get that in some form of a government employee. I don't think that's the majority, but there are people like that, I totally agree. But as far as like learning the culture of the ATF, was that a big transition for you, or did you feel like I'm over here now, like that's it,
I would almost say it was similar to housing, because ATF's a small agency. I mean, so we knew each other, good people. It's hard to differentiate when you get individual personalities, NYPD cops from ATF agents and DEA agents. I worked a bit with the FBI. What I found with them is they again, I don't want to upset anybody. It's almost like a cult, because they just show the bureau, like they put the agency and the agency's reputation and the agency's pride and above all other things. Where what I found with the DEA guys that I work with, mostly with the Red Rum Group in New York, and with the ATF guys, it was about the case. They didn't give a shit. Like, you could make fun of ATF and ATF office space, and people will laugh along with you. You know what I mean? Like, I remember one time a guy came in, there was a shirt, because our shirt said ATF agent in really big letters on the back. Some guy came in with a shirt that was made by some anti-gun guy and said ATF is gay. And that shirt wound up thumbtacked on a bulletin board in our office space for months. Like nobody cared. I think if you did that in the FBI, you'd probably be brought outside and lynched because agency pride is so big for them. So it was kind of really not much of a transition when it comes to culture.
Yeah, no, that's good. And then so you're there, you're in ATF, you're working cases. How do you become a supervisor there? How does that happen? Because you said I really wasn't looking to be a supervisor. Like, how does that transition happen? What you just told, hey, congratulations.
Yeah. So what happened was I was an agent in New York for about 6 years, worked on some really cool cases, continued to work with a lot of the people I work with as a detective. Like there really wasn't much of a transition, still focused on the Bronx because I mostly worked in the Southern District of New York. So, I was comfortable there, but, my wife had knee surgery and she had a lot of issues with her knee. And then things were starting to get expensive. And, we figured, hey, man, maybe it won't be so bad for your leg and maybe we can get someplace cheaper. So what happened was, I put in for transfers. One was to Paducah, Kentucky, which thank God I didn't get. I would have never fit in Paducah, Kentucky. Another was to Tampa. And I was denied because if you're an ATF agent in New York City, it's a very high cost city to live in. So people don't want to transfer there. People want to get out. So they don't let you out that easy. So there's two ways out. You could go to another agency and try to move. Or you can promote out. So what happened was I put in for supervisors jobs in Jacksonville, Savannah, Dallas, and Phoenix. I had never been to Phoenix ever in my life, and I had been to Dallas once. So one day I'm driving home and I get the notification, hey, Pete, congrats, you've been selected for a job in Phoenix. And uprooted the family and went out to Phoenix. Great place to live, by the way. The work in there kind of sucked, as you know, you read the book. But so it was a bit of an adventure. So we just packed up the stuff. The government movers showed up, loaded up a truck. And the next thing you know, the end of, I think February 26th was the day I actually showed up in Phoenix. And great, kind of nervous, to be honest with you, running a group. Because when you're a detective or when you're a cop, you're really responsible for yourself. You know what I mean? So if your headaches are your headaches. As a group supervisor, now I had 10 people under me, plus a bunch of Phoenix cops, eventually a marshal, a deputy U.S. marshal, some ICE agents. But I didn't want to be a dick. Like I didn't want to go there and not be a good boss. So I tried as best I could to just be a good boss. I took advice of a guy named Jerry Arena, who I really loved. He was the SRT team leader, who I knew back when I was an agent. Actually met him first when I was in the Homicide squad. So when he found out I was promoting, his advice was, and I think this is sage advice, be the boss that you'd want to work for. So that's what I tried to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, you had experience with bosses, so you know what's a good boss, what's a bad boss. I mean, it's not like, I think that's how I transitioned. I was like, what did I like about this guy? What did I hate about this guy? And I did that with all my bosses, and I kind of am like a sum of all the people I ever worked for,
Same.
And like that's, I think that was my leadership style. I looked at the things that I liked. And who better to be a boss than a guy who's ran cases over and over again? You know what makes a good case. You know how to build a case. You know how to see it from start to finish. So why can't you do the same now, looking over a bunch of maybe seasoned, maybe more experienced than you, maybe less experienced than you? Like, it sounds like it was the right time. So let's get into that now. So now you're in Phoenix, and I think one of the highlights, when I thought of Phoenix, I think of like a pro law enforcement, almost like old USA Southern town. But that wasn't the case for you when you're there. You're there, and if you could just walk us through, like, what's your experience bringing cases in Phoenix?
Yeah, no, it's funny. Well, first, when I got to the group, to your point, half the group had a lot more time on with ATF than me, and then half were younger folks. It was interesting because the senior people actually respected my NYPD time because they didn't have to. They could have been like, "Hey, man, you know how it goes. You haven't been an agent long enough. We don't respect you." I never had that. So what happened was, and look, going back to the trigger lock program, like I said, we brought a lot of cases to the feds, and they all turned into convictions. Nobody got acquitted. But I mean, a lot of them turned into bigger cases. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying we had experience dealing with federal prosecutors bringing cases. So when I get out to Phoenix, first thing I hear from my agents is how the U.S. Attorney's Office isn't taking cases and it really sucks. And I'm like, okay, let me see how I can work this. Maybe because I had good relationships with the Southern District, maybe I can, nuance relationships with Arizona, U.S. Attorney's Office. But man, I saw real quickly, like, they would take cases and just turn them away. Like what they would say is, give an example. My first weekend out in Phoenix, I get a call from one of my agents who got a call from a gun store. Like the gun dealers used to call us all the time when they would see something suspicious. And the guy was saying, hey, man, a guy just showed up. He's got a bag full of money, and he wants all the AK-47 variant rifles that we have on the shelves. So I'm like, well, how many is it? It's 13. So we roll out there. We call the dealer when we're outside saying, hey, man, we're out here. Conduct the transaction. The dealer conducts the transaction. We watch these guys load these 13 AK-47s into a yellow Ryder truck. We watch that truck leave the parking lot. We follow it because we don't want to take action right there and burn the guy that he called us, because these guys are trafficking in cartels. You don't want to put the dealer in a bad spot. And also, we don't want to endanger any civilians that might be in the parking lot or shopping there. So we follow them. They get on I-10 heading south. We stop the car. We do like cops do everywhere around the country, man. Nothing scandalous. We separate the two people inside. Where are you coming from? They give different answers. One guy's like, hey, we were at my mother's house. The other guy's, hey, we were playing soccer. Okay, well, did you stop anywhere? No, we just came straight from there. So now you know they're lying. Then you have what the FFL, which is the gun dealer, told us. So you catch them in enough lies, we decide, all right, just like anywhere else, we're going to seize these weapons. We know they didn't buy them for themselves. Call the U.S. Attorney's office, and this is the first interaction I have with them. Is like, let them go. We'll indict this case. We'll indict it later. Now, again, coming from New York, you stop a van with 13 AK-47s in New York City, that's going to be like breaking news almost. In Arizona, the fact that they were like, let him go was like, okay, I don't get it, but I'm new here and I got to learn the culture because each U.S. Attorney's office is a little bit different. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess that, we're going to have to go and pick these guys up again later when an indictment comes, which bothered me too, because these guys had guns. They weren't good people. Now I got to have my agent potentially knock on doors of guys who I know have access to firearms. Kind of scary too. So anyway, that indictment never comes, right? So I'm noticing that we do similar car stops several times a week. And hey, man, we'll indict it later. The indictments aren't coming. And I look at our case management system. Again, I'm there a short time. We have 448 open cases, and I start really scouring through them. And a lot of them are awaiting U.S. Attorney's decision. And then I look at some of them. The statute of limitations had expired while they're waiting for these decisions. So, I mean, that was problem number one. But we're still making the car stops because if we don't stop these cars with these guns in them, my thoughts are some cop's going to get shot or some kid's going to get shot, because we don't know that they're all going to Mexico. We presume that they were. And look, we also can't let these guns cross the border. So we're seizing over the course of my time there thousands of guns. So that's one thing. They wouldn't take those cases with the car stops. So then another thing happens. I get a call from this woman, Rachel Hernandez. She was the chief of the gun unit at the time, and she wants to have a sit down. And she comes with the chief of the criminal division, which is pretty high ranking in the U.S. Attorney's office. This guy, John Tucci, nice man. I won't say the same for Rachel. So we sit down, and she's just really pissed off about this informant. She tells us, hey, man, we're not taking any more cases with this informant number 921. So I'm aware that this informant has given us like a lot of cases, like over 20 cases are sitting, waiting for this informant to be used as a witness. And these are cases that they were going to decide on later and indict later. So what she alleges is that the informant was a liar, that the informant's information was bad. So now I'm pissed because I'm like, wait a minute. I had all those great cases with Southern District. I had good relationships, and you burn your bridges with the U.S. Attorney's office, you're dead in the water, which I later learned. So, but anyway, what happens is I go down, and now it's like, all right, bring in all the cases. I sit down with my agents, and we're there working till like the wee hours of the night looking through the cases. And everything that informant said was spot on, like accurate. One of the better informants I've actually seen when it comes to the accuracy of his information.
Did she tell you what was not credible? Or she's not credible.
Not credible. She deemed him not credible, and she's there with her.
Didn't tell you why he wasn't credible.
No. So, but anyway, and she's there with her boss, who's very quiet. He's just there kind of nodding. So anyway, I call her back and I'm like, hey, Rachel, I disagree with your assessment. I said, I'm looking through these cases and this informant's information is spot on. She said, whoa. She goes, what I meant to say is that this informant was moved with EWAP funds, which is Emergency Witness Assistance Program funds. So they basically, if you're a witness in a federal case, there's WITSEC, which is where you go into, victim witness program, and the marshals coordinate it. And then there's times where the agency will pay for you to move somewhere else. And that's what we did. We paid for him to leave town, this informant. He went somewhere else for a little while, hated it, came back to Phoenix, and got back into the business again. So my agents were using him. So she said that we couldn't use him. It was a violation of DOJ policy to use this informant. And I'm like, that didn't sound right to me. So I call Wendy Olson, who was the victim witness coordinator for Southern District of New York, who worked on some of the most high-profile cases in DOJ, like entirely. And I asked her if that was accurate. She goes, no, that's not accurate. And she gave me the number of someone at Maine Justice to call. And what I was told is, by both of them, is you can use this person as a witness, but you just need to be prepared that if you ever go to trial, you might have to talk about that he was paid all that money to move. So you're going to have to basically articulate the money he made, because the defense is probably going to say that you're paying him for his testimony. But that's normal. So I called Rachel back again, right? Man, she was pissed that I would second guess her.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So now her final response is, you don't understand. That guy wears too many gold chains. He wears too much jewelry. A jury will never relate to him. End of story. We will not use him. Period. Final answer. Right. So now all of these cases involving people who are smuggling guns to the cartels disappear. We can't do anything with them at this point. Like, I'm pulling my hair out. So what happens at that point is we have another case that rises around the same time. And I'm only in Phoenix for like a few months at this point, where a guy, this kid named Victor Varela, young kid, a gun he purchased was found in a daycare center in Juarez after it killed the Mexican police commander. So this is going back 2007. And so the gun gets traced to this kid, Victor Varela. So we determine where he bought it. We find out some other stuff that he had done. And then we identify some of the people he was working with. So what happened was, this guy was involved in smuggling guns to the Juarez cartel. He had an uncle that was in that cartel. So we present this case, and then the U.S. Attorney's Office comes up with this new thing. So we had this, and we had another case at the same time going on, where a gun was purchased in Phoenix that was found in a town just south of the U.S.-Arizona border, a town called Cananea, right? It was an AR-15 type rifle. The gun was used in a shooting in which 21 people were shot, right, and killed. 4 of those killed are Mexican cops, right? And the cartel doesn't do drive-by shootings like in LA, where they drive by in a car and shoot the place up. They go in like a caravan. So in addition to these 21 people that are shot, 4 cops, 4 other cops are kidnapped, brought into the desert, beaten, and left for dead in the desert. So the gun that was used in that case was literally bought like within 48 hours before, which is rare, like that a gun is bought and then brought down to Mexico that soon. So we present these 2 cases, and we're told, hey, you know, the gun is in Mexico. That means the body of the crime is in Mexico. We can't prosecute these cases. This was a thing that this U.S. Attorney's Office, and only this U.S. Attorney's Office, came up with. They called it their corpus delicti policy. So if the gun made its way to Mexico, right, then they wouldn't prosecute the case because the body of the crime is in Mexico. The problem is like straw purchasing. When people go to buy guns for traffickers, sometimes, like when dealers would see something suspicious, they would call us. But a straw purchase is an act of deception. And if you're good at deceiving, we wouldn't know about those purchases till the guns were found at crime scenes, sometimes in the United States, sometimes in Mexico. So now we're dead in the water because the guns, if the guns made its way to Mexico, no case. Our CI, who was our primary CI, no cases, 21 cases roughly in the garbage can. So, and then with the other cases, we couldn't take those cases to the county because straw purchasers have clean records, right? Where if we caught somebody with a gun, the worst thing that could happen is they have no criminal history, because then you have nothing else you could charge them with. With some of the cases, like if the trafficker had a prior felony or something, we could at least take those cases to the county. But so this went on for years, where we were seizing guns, trying to put people in jail who were trafficking guns to the cartels, and fell on its face. And here's the thing to consider too, like when you talk about when guns are recovered, when ATF broadly looks at crime gun recoveries, right? If a gun is recovered at a crime scene less than 2 years after it's purchased, that's considered a bit of a red flag. Now, it doesn't mean that the person who bought the gun is a criminal. You could have bought it and left it in your car was burglarized. You could have bought it, took it home, shot it, and said, hey, this gun sucks. That happens. Or like I've seen people, they have a gun in the house, and then the wife has a baby, and for some reason, okay, I don't want to have a gun in the house. They sell it. But I mean, so anything less than 2 years, ATF's going to take a look at, and may or may not interview the buyer. It depends on the circumstances. But 2 days in that other case with the Cananea, again, with 4 dead cops, 4 tortured cops, how do you say no to that case? But this is what I lived, which was vastly different than what I saw in New York. And it went on, like I said, for about 3 years. And eventually, 2009, Phoenix became the home invasion capital of the United States and was second in this hemisphere behind Mexico City, which is a city of like 13, 14 million people. So my group's focus was changed to work on home invasion robberies, and a new group was stood up to work on the Phoenix-bound firearms trafficking cases.
So you have hundreds and hundreds of cases where you have probable cause, and the U.S. attorney saying we're doing absolutely nothing with this.
Yeah,
and then they're just implementing their own rules. Like, we're not going to do this because of that. We're not going to do this because of that. But none of that is actually a policy from the actual DOJ. It's just this one office is making up their own rules.
Yes, 100%. And this is the bizarre part. Like, we seized so many guns. We had a pretty big evidence vault, right? So, I mean, our guns, once they were seized, would have to go into this vault. So vault became full to the point where you couldn't even really go in it, right? So we had for the first time that I'm aware of in ATF history, we had to get like a variance memo to rent a Connex box. And it was put in a secure location. That thing quickly became full of guns that were being sent to Mexico that we seized. A second Connex box. So, I mean, we were seizing them, right? We were getting the evidence. We were getting the confessions. Don't forget, we spoke to these straw purchasers. They confessed to us. No action. So now in 2009, right, when we take over this home invasion mission, which I was relieved to do because they did take some of those cases, the U.S. Attorney's Office, a new group is stood up called Phoenix Group 7, and their first case is this case called Jacob Chambers et al. And others, Latin. That's the Fast and Furious case. And the same idiots that would not prosecute our cases because the guns are in Mexico have now devised a strategy that, hey, maybe if we let the guns go to Mexico and we could tie these recoveries to cartel-related locations, we could build this huge case. So, like flipping a light switch, they went from, hey, we won't prosecute these cases, to their strategy becomes, hey, they wouldn't prosecute because the guns were in Mexico in many instances. Now their strategy becomes, let the guns go to Mexico.
After thousands and thousands of cases don't get brought forward and guns just getting trafficked and nobody's worried about getting caught, so they created a systemic problem. Now they're gonna do it. But before you go there, here's my question for you, because I think a lot of people in the audience are gonna say this: why do we give a shit if guns are going to Mexico? This is the United States. What do we care? And in your experience, have you seen those guns come back over the border?
Well, I mean, look, the thing that broke, because we didn't know they were walking guns in that other group. So to answer your question, I'll put an exclamation point on that one. Brian Terry, who was a U.S. Border Patrol agent, was murdered with one of those guns that came back across the border. What happened was there's no honor amongst thieves. These cartels, they smuggle drugs into the U.S., as you know, across the border. Well, there's other factions that rob people coming across the border with drugs because, hey, man, if I steal it, I'm selling it for an entire profit as opposed to selling it for a profit over what I paid for it. So Brian Terry was murdered with one of those guns, and it was an agent in that group named John Dodson who were letting these guns walk, who came forward and originally called Senator Grassley's office. And we didn't know in my group that this was happening, where they were letting guns walk. And the agents working in Mexico, because we dealt with them a lot too, they didn't know that the ATF people in Phoenix, because this was a small group of people in Phoenix, were letting the guns go into Mexico. So then John Dodson, who steps forward, calls Senator Grassley's office, he was in that group, so he knew what was happening. So I'm at a meeting in the Phoenix Field Division where the head of the Phoenix office, the guy Bill Newell's there, every supervisor of all the different groups in Phoenix is there, and then supervisors from like Albuquerque, Tucson, Las Cruces, they're on the phone. So this is our weekly big meeting. Bill Newell comes in, and his words almost exactly were, hey, the U.S. Attorney's Office is really pissed at John Dodson for contacting Grassley's office. If I were you, I'd steer clear of John. Don't be surprised if he doesn't find himself indicted. And I'm sitting here saying, wait a minute. Like, my blood was boiling, John. So I'm like, wait, we referred hundreds of cases to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they would not indict it. Some of them, they let sit till the statute of limitations expired. And an agent in that group calls Senator Grassley's office, who has the right to conduct oversight, right? Congress can oversee government. And they're going to talk about indicting him. That's the night I went home and had to sit down with my wife and say, hey, man, I think I need to step up and call Grassley's office, because they're saying he was lying. They were saying John Dodson was lying. He wasn't lying.
I mean, that's insane to me. Like that whole part. So if you had to sum up Fast and Furious for the audience, how would you sum it up as what the operation was, what they were doing, and why it was wrong?
Well, look, you don't let guns fall into the hands of criminals, period. Because people getting killed in Mexico are human beings. Any cop stopping one of those cars going down I-10, like some Arizona DPS guy, could have been at the other end of one of those rifles. So that's a big no. And in ATF, we did not do that. We did not let go. Like if we did an undercover deal, and I'm the agent, you're the bad guy, we're going to conduct that deal in a place where you can't get away. Right now, I might let you touch that gun. The second you have your hands on that gun, a SWAT team is jumping on you or you're getting boxed in, that gun is not leaving the perimeter of that deal. So the whole concept of letting guns disappear so that eventually when they get recovered, we could try to put a pin on a map and say, hey, that's a cartel spot or that's a cartel incident. And these straw purchasers are tied to those incidents and therefore they're supporting the cartel. It's monstrous. And I mean like diabolical because most of the guns that get recovered in Mexico, they're not getting recovered in search warrants. The police down there don't have time for search warrants. They're getting recovered at crime scenes. And a lot of those crime scenes are dead cops, dead soldiers. And again, we didn't know this was going on until Brian Terry gets killed. And then all of a sudden you can see people like scurrying off into corners, like mumbling to each other. And that's when John Dodson comes forward and speaks about what was happening because he was in that group. We didn't know. And truthfully, when John Dodson first came forward, originally we were all like, there's no fucking way. There's no way to do it because it went against the grain of everything that we did and believed in. And it's weird because as the scandal grew, two things happened. One is people outside of Phoenix thought John Dodson was a liar. Then they thought I was full of shit too because we just wouldn't do that. So you had that happening. And then you had people trying to bury myself, John, because they thought that we were somehow anti-ATF. Because again, it was so unbelievable that they would allow something like that to happen that until word started to really get out and Congress started looking at it, people just couldn't fathom that it was even being allowed to happen. But again, the thing that people forget is this wasn't just ATF. This was two federal prosecutors, that were kind of architects of the path that led to this. And one of those prosecutors was also the prosecutor on a case where a guy was smuggling grenades into Mexico that would blow people's minds because that thing was kept under wraps somehow. The Kingery grenade case. He smuggled hundreds of grenades into Mexico for the Sinaloa cartel. Hundreds.
I mean, so it's basically the U.S. attorney in Phoenix strategy that's arming the cartel. That's basically what happened. It was bad policy. Am I wrong? I don't think that was their intention to do, but it was what was happening. Am I wrong on that? It's like we're just letting guns go. Yeah, don't worry about it. Don't stop those guys. Don't worry if a cop gets killed on the way. Don't worry if a house gets invaded on the way. We're gonna know what happens and we're gonna track the guns back. And so basically you're arming, like the way I'm looking at it is your strategy, part of your strategy is arming the cartel. Maybe that's not the intended strategy, but it's happening.
Well, and I would argue that that's correct. But it's funny because I get into discussions with people like, so you're blaming the U.S. Attorney's Office? Yes and no. Because as an agent, when they wouldn't take our cases, we didn't say, okay, let's just not stop these cars. So we seized guns. We never let guns that were in the hands of bad people ride off into the sunset because of the reasons I spoke about earlier. Where they felt comfortable doing that bothers me because they could have taken the cases to the county. They could have seized the guns and filled up their vault too. They just chose to follow that legal advice and just let these guns ride off into the sunset. And look, I honestly think that this was just like gross incompetence, laziness, malfeasance on the part of the U.S. Attorney's Office. Because, hey, man, if you don't take the case, you don't have to work. You know what I mean? And in fact, in the Fast and Furious case, there was one straw purchaser alone. Again, the straw purchaser is the guy that's going into the store, filling out the form, handing the gun to the trafficker. One of those straw purchasers bought over 800 firearms before they decided, hey, man, let's indict that guy. And that was after Brian Terry got killed with one of those guns. So when is enough enough?
And that's 800 guns that were on the cartel that could possibly make its way back over the border, murder innocent people in Mexico, murder cops in Mexico, as well as, unfortunately, rest in peace to Brian Terry and to his family because it was bad policy. So at the end of the day, Fast and Furious, the way I look at Fast and Furious, it was a horrible policy. It was a horrible, dumb, incompetent, inept policy that was allowed to flourish, that people got on, and you and other people stood up and said, this is bad. We need to stop doing this right away. and you guys became the bad guys.
Yeah.
And you're anti-law enforcement, and you're anti-American, and you're anti-ATF. And meanwhile, all you're doing is saying, this is wrong. We got to stop this.
Right.
But you had to go to the higher levels because there was, where are you going to go? You're fighting with these people for years, and they're just not only would they not stop it, they doubled down on it, and they made it like an official strategy.
Yeah. And look, while this is going on, police helicopters are being shot down with 50 caliber rifles that were trafficked as part of that case. I wound up testifying in front of Congress, and literally as I'm testifying in front of Congress, and this was on June 15th, 2011, I have the chief of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Arizona saying, hey, that guy's perjured himself. We never declined those cases, the cases I was speaking of earlier. Luckily, a lot of them were declined in writing. But I mean, for 4 years, I spent defending myself, fighting to clear my name, because originally all the way up to Eric Holder, they were saying, hey, those guys are lying. ATF never walks guns. It's their policy to never walk guns. DOJ does not. Hey, I had hair there. DOJ doesn't walk guns. So I mean, they lied their asses off. And look, you mentioned Brian Terry's family earlier. One of the saddest things in this, because I speak to them occasionally, mostly his brother, these are wonderful people. These are like the people you want living next door to you. Brian Terry was a Marine who then went to the Border Patrol, and then within 3 years was on BORTAC. Now, BORTAC is like, that's their elite SWAT team. I would actually put them above FBI's HRT on the federal SWAT team scale, I know. But this guy was like a legend. I mean, this guy was a beast, right? Patriot. His family was never treated. First off, they were treated like shit by ATF and DOJ. They still don't have the answers that they were looking for. I mean, when I wrote my book, the first copies before I let it go public, I sent them copies because I wanted them to read it before the public did. And I think they were grateful. But I don't answer all the questions. I answered what I know, because the book, look, there's nothing in the book that's speculative. It's all what I saw personally in Phoenix. But I feel so bad for them. But the other thing is, no lawyers in the Department of Justice were held accountable for this. Some people from ATF were fired. Some of them were scapegoated, actually. Some of the people who deserved to be fired weren't. So, I mean, it was a mess. And, it's not how people expect their government to act.
No, yeah, it was terrible. You brought up the grenade case where the guy was smuggling grenades. I think that was the part of the book where I was really like, what the hell is going on? Could you just walk like the audience through that? Like when, the main seizure, when he actually finally, you're watching the guy for a while, but when he actually finally does get stopped by Border Patrol, and what he has and what he admits to and what the U.S. attorney's telling you. I mean, I think that was like, I can't believe I can't believe this happened.
No, it's mind blowing. It's sickening, actually. So what happened was this guy, Jean-Baptiste Kingery, because a short time into my time in Phoenix, what happened was there was an office that was created in Yuma, and it was under a different supervisor. He wasn't going down there. He wasn't treating the people right. So what happened was my boss, Bill Newell, moved the Yuma office under me as well. So I had Phoenix and I had Yuma. So the Yuma agents were made aware from an Army Navy shop of some guy who came in and kept buying like inert grenades. Like, they're trinkets. They're not real grenades, but he bought a lot of them. So we start looking at this guy, and we found out that he had purchased 4 firearms that were believed to be smuggled into Mexico in the past. That case was surprisingly declined by the U.S. Attorney's offices before we start looking at the grenades. So what happens is we find out that this guy's been ordering grenade parts from all over the United States. There was a place up in upstate New York, I think called Old Sarges. There was a place in Illinois. So he's ordering all of these parts, but they're legal to possess in the U.S., right? Like you've seen probably those taken number grenades and whatnot, like on people's desks, or I've seen them like lamp bases. So it's basically they're not old military grenades; they're cast iron grenade bodies with all the other parts on top. So anyway, this case progresses. So we try to do a controlled delivery with Kingery, and he catches on to the surveillance and he makes it away. We don't know whether or not he took grenades or not with him on that particular instance. But anyway, so as we're watching him, at one point he gets caught crossing into Mexico at he gets caught crossing at the San Luis port of entry, going into Mexico by CBP. What they do is they do an X-ray of his vehicle, which is weird because Mexico's job is supposed to be to screen stuff going into Mexico. They do such a shitty job that CBP does it for them sometimes. And what they do is they X-ray Kingery's car, and they see a bunch of grenades in his tire. They're disassembled, right? And again, it's not illegal to have them in the U.S. It is illegal to export them. It's a violation of the Arms Export Control Act. Some of the parts of the grenades are prohibited. So what happens is when they x-ray the car, they don't know that they're disassembled grenades. They just see a bunch of grenades in a tire. So they do what you would expect them to do. They shut down the port, which you close down an international port of entry. It's a big deal, right? And you got to remember, the cartel bosses are watching shit coming across the border because they have a vested interest in making sure their guns are coming across, their grenades are coming across. So now the bomb squad has to come and render this vehicle safe. So it's a big production. So Kingery's brought into custody, and originally, Emery Hurley, who was the same lead prosecutor on Fast and Furious, is now the lead prosecutor on Kingery. He says, hey, man, don't keep him in custody. He's willing to come back tomorrow and be interviewed. Can you guys interview him tomorrow? Now, I'm in Phoenix at the time. Yuma's about a 4-hour drive. So I'm starting to head down to Yuma. We're going to interview him the next day. But I was worried he might not show up. But he does. He shows up. So my agents put him in the interview room. In the interview room with them is an ICE attorney. So he's a lawyer, a federal agent who's a lawyer. And Kingery goes on to talk to us about what he was doing. And he admits, yeah, I've been making grenades for the Sinaloa cartel. I've made about 800 of them so far. Explains what he does. Get a full confession. Call back to the U.S. Attorney's Office, call Emery. And Emery says, hey, you know, Pete, I don't like this. He can always say he's making those hilarious complaint, exact words, hilarious complaint department, take a number, executive desktop items or novelty items. So I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Like, I'm so pissed off now that he's not wanting to take this case with the confession that this guy's making the grenades in Mexico. And we had other evidence too, that I called the Southern District of New York because they were working a couple of cases with the Sinaloa cartel, figuring, hey, can you somehow absorb this into your bigger cases? And their response is, hey, man, did any of the parts come out of our district? No. Any wire transfers of money through our district? No. So here I'm saying, here we have the crimes happening in Arizona, right? They won't touch this case. New York is willing to take the case on the thinnest of threads. So anyway, I'm fighting big time with Emery Hurley. So finally, he's like, all right, listen, how about we do this? Let's see if we can get a little bit more. So now, this is for the first time in my career. And again, you know, as a detective, you live and die in the interview room. I've never brought a guy back into the interview room for a re-interview on the same day. But we bring Kingery back in. Tells us the same thing. I've been making about 800 grenades. He admits that he was making taking the AR-15 rifles that are sold here that are semi-automatic rifles and the AK-47 variant rifles, which are semi-automatic. And he's converting them into machine guns for the cartels. And he adds that he would occasionally take thumb drives from Mexico to bring back into the U.S. And we're like, okay, well, what's on the thumb drives? He goes, well, you know, sometimes people might owe some money. It's instructions for what? For the cartel people in the U.S. to reach out and touch people that are operatives in the U.S.
Like hit this guy, get the money from the.
Yes.
Great. So that was the part that was the craziest to me. He admitted to moving stuff in between and nothing.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so I fight with Emery again. And this is a screaming match. Now the ICE lawyer, who's a lawyer, he gets it. We're screaming. Finally, Emery's like, well, you know, let him go. We're not willing to charge this. You know, we can speak. We'll meet in 2 weeks and we'll decide whether or not we can indict this. So I'm like, okay, this is more of the same, right? And we'll indict it later. So that meeting comes up 2 weeks later, and then I get the song and dance as to why. You know, this has no jury appeal. The people aren't going to buy into it. What if the confession gets thrown out? I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. So anyway, this goes on for some time. Now, at this point, we have Kingery himself saying, hey, man, the cartel knows that you guys had me in custody.
Lock me up.
You need to lock me up. Like, he's begging us to arrest him. And
they're going to kill me. Yeah, right, they're going to kill me.
So anyway, doesn't happen. We're fighting. Now, Emery Hurley, the lead prosecutor, goes radio silent on us. He's not even returning our calls. Fast and Furious is going on. This is going on now. So eventually, we get enough information where we're able to get the Mexican government to hit Kingery's mill. This is many, many months later because we caught wind it, you know, because he stopped for a little while because he knew we were onto him. But you know how it happens, brother. He's making money down there. He's doing his thing. So he just finds another way to do it. So when the Mexicans hit his location in Culiacan, Sinaloa, with ATF people there with him, they actually recover enough grenade parts and explosives components and everything to make about 1,000 grenades. They recover the machinery that he was using to take the AR-15s. Like, he basically had a gunsmithing shop. They recover that. And they find out that he was actually teaching other people how to do this. So he was, in essence, the armorer to the Sinaloa cartel, who for well over a year, we couldn't get put in jail because of the U.S. Attorney's Office's policies. It was mind-blowing. It was the most, to me, and maybe I'm just, because I was fighting for it because I knew what was going on as it was going on, unlike Fast and Furious, where I found out after the fact. To me, like I found this to be more appalling than Fast and Furious.
Joy says it's like being on the telephone switchboard operator in the precinct and telling the confession murderer to come back later.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. So, all right. So you were like, I can't live with this. I'm not cool with this. You find out what's going on. You see that people are getting assaulted and you're like, I'm going to tell my story of what happened. And right. I'm going to go to the Congress. What happens to you as a result of that?
Well, a couple things. Actually, before there was the hearing, there was a deposition. So it happened in a conference room in a hotel about 6 blocks away from our office. So I show up at this deposition and I tell them everything. I tell these. So you had people from Senator Grassley's staff, Senator Leahy's staff. He was the chairman of the judiciary at the time. You had Darrell Issa was the chairman of oversight, and Elijah Cummings was the ranking member. So you had staffers from all 4 of those offices there. Room full of staffers, all lawyers. So I tell them everything. I mean, I laid everything. Took about 6 hours for this deposition. So I leave and I walk back to my office, about 6 to 8 blocks away, right? I parked at the office because I didn't want to pay for parking because I'm a cheap fuck. So anyway, before I even get back to the office, I get a phone call from an AUSA because some of the prosecutors there were good people. They wanted to do their jobs. They didn't like their office's policies either. And the guy's like, hey, Pete, I just want to let you know everything that you said in that hearing with the deposition, rather, which was supposed to be confidential, was relayed to the United States Attorney, who's the presidential appointee. He's the chief federal law enforcement officer for the state of Arizona. So I'm like, oh shit. All right. So I know I got to watch my back now.
And it's Holder at the time, right? Am I right?
Well, Holder was the attorney general of the U.S. This was a guy named Dennis Burke. So he's the U.S. attorney in Arizona.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
He was a Janet Napolitano crony, worked with her for years. So, all right, now I know I got to watch my back. So then a day later, I get a phone call from another assistant U.S. attorney in that office. And that person's like, hey, man, can we meet for coffee? So I go meet them at Paradise Bakery downstairs from my office. And the guy prints out, and he had an email that was printed out, and he slid it across the table to me. And I read it, and it's from Dennis Burke, again, the U.S. attorney, to his entire staff. And it basically said, anyone running into Pete Forcelli, even if it's seeing him having a cup of coffee with his family on the weekend, will report this to me through your chain of command immediately. So this guy's telling me, hey, man, you need to watch your back. So that happens. Then as time progresses, I remember one day I'm leaving I lived in a little area. It wasn't a gated area, but it's kind of a secluded community, certain ways in and out. And I see like this burgundy Monte Carlo parked in the street. You can't park in the street. You got to. So I leave, start making some turns. That car's behind me. Go into a gas station. That car. So I'm getting surveilled by people. This happens. There was a Crown Victoria, which stood out. There was the Burgundy Monte Carlo. There was a time when I went to a restaurant with my wife and my kids, and we're sitting there, right? Because sometimes the surveillance was attempting to be covert, and it might have been times I didn't see it. There were times where it was overt, and this was one of those. Like I'm sitting there, it's one of those places where you have like a long bench that goes down the wall, and then there's tables, and on the other side there's chairs. So me and my wife and my kids sit down to eat dinner, and these dudes come and sit down like a couple tables down from us. And they're literally just like staring at us. And they look like feds. I don't know. I still to this day don't know if they were FBI doing favors for the U.S. Attorney's Office, OIG. Originally, I thought they could have been ATF Internal Affairs, but later I got to know everybody in ATF Internal Affairs. It wasn't them. So I still don't know who was surveilling me, but we were under surveillance, which made it tough because here I'm trying to communicate with my lawyer, and you don't want to do it by email. You don't want to do it by phone because are they tapping your phones? Are they monitoring your emails? Because during the same time, they were taking Cheryl Atkinson, the CBS lawyer who was reporting on Fast and Furious. They were pulling her emails. So it became really expensive to have to go and deal with a lawyer when you got to do it face to face every time. And my lawyer was in the DC area. So every time I wanted to talk to my lawyer, it meant getting on a plane. So, I mean, it nearly bankrupted us. But it took about 4 years of constant OIG interviews and various other interviews with other entities. It got to the point where 6 different times I said, look, man, if you don't believe me, put me on a polygraph. And they never did. But I mean, I was willing to do it, which is a gamble, man. You blow a polygraph, they'll pull you a security clearance and you get fired. But at that point, I had my back to the wall. I didn't know what else to do, you know?
And do you have any representation in ATF? Like if you know, like for that, was that anywhere you could even go to? Like, I mean, you're fighting the federal government at this point. I don't know where you're going, but I mean, as far as like, you know, you're coming out of pocket for your attorney, all that stuff. Is there any like base like that? Is there any type of union for the ATF?
Yeah. We had FLIOA, and truthfully, like the FLIOA attorneys represented me at the hearing itself, right?
Okay.
So I mean, which would have cost me probably about $50,000-$60,000 just to have a lawyer deal with that. But what happened was some of these other cases, like they were accusing me of perjury, and then with the grenade case, I was afraid they were going to try to say that we told Kingery to. So they were lying about other stuff. So I just figured, something, I need to get a criminal attorney on board as well.
Yeah.
So that's, I just wanted to cover my ass. The sad part is, like, for a lot of things that happen, a lot of the agents are lawyers. It's like, if I got fired, man, I was out of the NYPD for over a year, can't go back. I was kind of older. I mean, all I knew at this point was how to be a cop. And like I said, I could do carpentry, but I suck at it. So, I mean, this was my livelihood on the line here. My ability to feed my wife and my kids.
And that's why I opened up earlier and I said you're an American hero and you should be a household name, because everybody, like when you have integrity in law enforcement, I don't think it's lauded. You become the enemy of that organization when really what happened was wrong. You called it out that it was wrong. It's no longer happening because it was wrong, and people lost their life as a result of it. And border agent Brian Terry lost his life as a result of it. And you and others were just trying to right that wrong.
Right.
So, and now you're a target of it. Your livelihood's on the line. Your life's on the line. You don't know if you're going to be charged criminally. You don't know if they're going to come up with some bogus criminal charge. It's sad, but it's sad to watch what happened. And so, like, what was there anything else that came as a result of it? We transfers?
Well, yeah, I basically couldn't represent my group at this point because, look, as a group supervisor, your job is to manage your group, right, or lead them, but it's also to deal with the U.S. Attorney's Office when things go sideways. So you're there to kind of like nuance things. Well, that U.S. Attorney's Office they were done with me, so I couldn't advocate for my group. And then part of me was worried about, like, will they screw with one of my agents to get back at me? So what happened was, originally I was removed from all cases except for the Kingery case, because that one was such a political hot potato that I didn't feel comfortable asking someone else to finish that one. I said, all right, well, I'm already neck deep in it. So once that case became finished, they sent me to the inspections division, which was this unfunded division. We had nothing to do. So then, luckily, Tom Brandon, who was the supervisor of the ATF office in Detroit, who was a special agent in charge, he got transferred to Phoenix for a short time. He was incredibly supportive. Like he said, man, as long as you're telling the truth, Pete, I got your back. He's a Jersey City guy, kept his word. So while I was getting my ass kicked, he eventually got promoted to the deputy director's job. So he couldn't really fight for me because he didn't know what was going on in Phoenix enough to do that. But he gave me the space to fight for myself, which was good because I needed that space. So eventually they wound up sending me up to Canada. So I was up there for 2 years. They figured, hey, man, if he's up there, the media can't get him. That's not entirely true. But it was a good experience because I love the Canadian cops, man. Solid people. It got me out of the grind for a little while, so I was able to recharge my batteries. But while I was in Canada, I was still being investigated for Kingery and for some of this other stuff. Still hadn't cleared my name. And then finally, at the end of my time in Canada, by that time, I was able to clear my name, came back to headquarters. And it was kind of cool because the director at the time was this guy named B. Todd Jones. He was appointed by Obama. And him and Brandon were like, hey, man, you've been through some really interesting things and you have some unique experiences. And during the same time, like, because of what happened in Fast and Furious, people didn't trust ATF leadership. So they were like, we would really like you to take over leadership and professional development division because people don't trust ATF leadership. So, here it's kind of weird that a whistleblower would be put in charge of, leadership development, but I was put in charge of ATF's leadership and professional development division. So I was able to bring in a lot of external training from like the Army War College, IACP, and get, good training that came in and helped restore some trust in leadership. And so that was a good experience. And then, like I said, after that, after a year in that role, I guess they were happy with what I did. I was sent down to Miami, which was a pretty good experience. I'll tell you what, Miami cops are very, very similar to New York cops.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I've interacted with them. Yeah. But so I just want to go back a little bit because, obviously all of this had to be a strain on your family, dude. And on you mentally, physically, emotionally. Like, I mean, to hear the story is one thing, to read the story one thing, to actually live through that, I mean, it's got to be a totally different experience. You know, you were a homicide detective, dude. You've seen and done a lot of things in your life. You've seen dead cops. You've seen dead kids. You've seen dead innocent people. You know, you went all the way through the ranks. You're dealing with high profile cartel members. You went through 9/11. You know, traumatic experience. How was this for you mentally, emotionally, physically, like going through all this, basically being at war with your own agency while still employed? Tom Joyce has talked about highway therapy. Highway therapy in the NYPD is when they take, it's called the ruler test. What they like to do is, all right, you live here. What's the furthest point in New York City where we could assign you, or where NYPD has? And so obviously you went from Arizona to Canada. So, yeah. You know, what was that like for you? What was that like for your wife, for your kids? Like, what was that time for you?
No, it was rough. And here's like part of the reason when I left New York, part of my escape reason was 9/11 too, to be honest with you. Like driving, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Southern District is really close to ground zero. So going down there all the time kind of weighed on me, plus my wife's knee. You know, when I was in Arizona, I'm not going to lie, you know, some of the stuff that I saw there still kind of bothered me. It still does today, actually. You know, and I lost some good friends. Like 6 of the guys that died on 9/11 were guys I knew. Some of them were close friends, Vinny Dange, John Coughlin, Walter Weaver. So, I mean, you know, surviving that day kind of weighed on me, as crazy as that is to say. So, you know, I was already not great when I went out there, but I was so caught up in the job that, again, man, like I said before, my wife and my kids were afterthoughts. And, you know, it wasn't until much later that I got my head out of my ass and realized that I wasn't doing right by them. But it was hard. The other thing was because when I was in Arizona, my daughter got a full ride scholarship to the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. But while we were being surveilled, she was terrified. So when I got thrown out of the state of Arizona and sent to headquarters, she came with us. And then when I got up to Canada, we were able to get her into the University of Toronto. She was luckily, because we were up there on a diplomatic mission, she got the in provincial rate because we wouldn't have been able to afford it otherwise. So the family went through hell. But, you know, look, I wasn't at that point a good enough husband or a good enough father to really even acknowledge what they were going through. I was just so caught up in the job like an idiot that I just stayed focused on what do I need to do to stay employed and to be as good a manager and good a leader as I could be. It wasn't until way later that I realized, hey, man, like, what were you doing? What were you thinking during all those years? And not just the years after 9/11 or during Fast and Furious. I mean, through the years, even when I was just a cop and a detective, you know, where I just put all my eggs in the law enforcement basket and didn't stop and smell the roses with the family, you know?
You know, it's hard, dude. You're trying to, law enforcement, you compartmentalize like a lot of stuff. And there's just a lot of things, you know, that humans aren't capable of dealing with. And, you know, when most of your waking hours are spent at work and dealing with all this stuff, life, family kind of becomes an added stress on you. And you kind of compartmentalize that too. And sometimes you don't realize what you're doing to your wife, your significant other, your children, the time you're taking away. And, I to say that like your situation isn't common, like that's, if you're doing your job in law enforcement, that's basically what most people are going to do. You know what I mean? You're going to your family kind of does come second, whether we admit it or not. Like I said it before, like I now looking back, I'm like, wow, I really did put the job in front of my family, my kids. Like I did, you know? And so I don't knock you. I think it's something that we realize at some point. Hopefully people realize it earlier. You know, we always say the job, you could love the job all you want, doesn't love you back. Right. And that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. But I mean, financially, we took a beating too. Like there was a point where I had I had a bunch of watches, which I shouldn't have bought. When I was a detective, I liked watches. So, you know, I'm not going to lie, some of them were put on the credit card where it may not have been the best judgment at the time when you're young. So I had 2 Breitlings, I had a couple of Omegas, I had to pawn them to help pay for the lawyers, I had to pawn a rifle my grandfather gave me. We had to hold a yard sale while we were still in Phoenix to be able to make the mortgage payment. And man, there's nothing as humbling as when you have all the tools, all my carpentry tools are sitting in the driveway, and you have these laborers and construction guys coming up, and you try to sell a drill for like $100, and they're like, say, no, I'll give you 25. And you're like, should I sell it for 25? You're like, I kind of have to because I got to make this payment. So that the fact that they had to live through that, and truthfully, while they were living through that, I didn't even really realize what an impact that had on him. And in fact, we got to the one day where we were like, hey, man, should we pawn our wedding rings? And that's when we sat down and go, hey, man, what are we doing? Like, that's just going too far. But, man, I'm blessed to have a wife. She went through a lot with me, and she's still with me.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, she's more of a warrior than you, bro. Like, I got to, like, that's she's
Puerto Rican from the Bronx, man. She's tough.
Yeah. She's that's a tough wife, man, to go through that. Oh, you want me to move to Arizona? Oh, we're moving to Canada? Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You're absolutely all blessed, dude. So I mean that's and but without her, maybe you don't make it too. That's the other thing. Maybe you don't make it through.
Right.
So, and another thing about you, I don't think that we talked about. You're a 9/11 survivor, dude. I mean, you're a bodybuilder. You're a muscular guy. I mean, you still are. You're still in shape. You still work out. I mean, but like you're not even talking about that, my friend. Like like that's another thing you're just brushing over. Like, you're a 9/11 survivor. You have one lung as you're sitting here right now. Like, why don't you tell us a little bit about that too? I mean, that's like, the physical demands, the mental demands that you've went through. I mean, dude, you're a national hero, in my opinion.
Bro, look, I was blessed to work with great people. I'm no hero. I did what the taxpayers expected me to do, But no, 9/11. Look, it was a rough day. I was there shortly after the first plane hit. I was there for a couple of days, on site before I even went home for that first, meeting with my wife. It was the third morning. So, I did what everybody else that was on the job at that time did. You went down there, you did your best to help be what it was such a gigantic scene that, there was no plan. You filled in whatever hole you could fill in at that time. But, I still, I saw people jump off the roofs. I still hear the sound, how it sounded when they hit the ground. I saw Vinny Danz, Walter Weaver, and John Coughlin walk into the plaza shortly before the South Tower crumbled, assuming that they were killed right then and there. So, I mean, there was things that haunted me. Like, I couldn't even go to I went to every police funeral that I could possibly go to, because I felt that was an honor to go and pay respects to people who did what we did. It's just a show of love. After 9/11, I couldn't go to even the funerals of my friends because I felt guilty that I was still here and they weren't. So I dealt with that for a while. And then, I had some other things that happened. And I hope people are listening because, I was stupid in dealing with it. One day I was driving home to New Jersey. I lived in Freehold when I left Yonkers. And all of a sudden I get these massive chest pains, right? I'm like, oh, fuck, what's going on? And so I'm still about 30 to 40 minutes from my house and at least 20 minutes from a hospital. So what do cops do when they think they're having a heart attack?
Try yourself in the hospital.
Yeah, exactly. I should have pulled, and I'm at a toll plaza. I could have stopped. Hey, Mr. Toll Man. No, I'm going to drive. So I get to the hospital, right? And the doctor and the nurse, I didn't know this, when they could tell if you're having a heart attack by enzymes in your blood. I didn't know that. So they put the monitors and they do all that stuff. They take the blood. They come in a little while later, and they ask me a bunch of questions. And they say you're not having a heart attack. And then they give me a shot of Demerol in the shoulder. The furniture never felt quite as comfortable as it did that evening. But I remember the nurse saying, hey, man, did you ever think that you might have PTSD? And I was like, it wasn't rude. That's not my nature. I'm a respectful person. But I'm like, no, it's absolutely not. Similar thing happened to me when we lived in Arizona, where I was in a Starbucks with a very good friend of mine, this guy, Tommy Mangan. Same thing, man. I was having such bad chest pains that he didn't even wait to call 911. He just right away called 911. They throw nitroglycerin pills down my throat, put me on a backboard, rushed me to the hospital. Spent a couple of nights in the hospital, a bunch of tests. Doctor says the same thing, man. You think you might have PTSD? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Bro, it wasn't until years later. I went down to Florida, like I was saying before. I was the number 2 in the office, then eventually promoted to the number 1 for the special agent charge job. And I was in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, mentoring a class of ASACs, Assistant Special Agents in Charge. So I'm up there as the class mentor. And, I'm at a bar called the Gingerbread Man. And if anybody is listening that lives near Carlisle, ice cold beer, great food, dirt cheap. I highly recommend the Gingerbread Man. So anyway, I cough. I'm in the bathroom and I cough up some blood. And I'm like, oh shit. I saw Breaking Bad. I knew what this meant. So, at this point I go to urgent care the next morning, and it's kind of a funny story. I walk in and there's a couple little kids waiting to be seen. I'm the only adult in this urgent care. So I go talk to the doctor, and all of a sudden they're doing chest x-ray, and this crappy little facility. They were nice, but those plywood doors that you could almost put your finger through?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in the room waiting for the x-ray results. And on the other side of the door, I can hear the doctor. He's like, oh, oh, Jesus, I can't tell this guy. This guy's going to freak out. And I'm like, I know he's talking about me. So he comes in. I'm like, okay, here we go. He's like, hey, we found a little something in the x-ray. It could be artifact. Don't worry about it, but we'll have our radiologist look at it. So, okay, no problem. I leave. I go back to this ASAC thing. And while I'm there, I get a phone call from the radiologist. He's like, hey, we found something. We'd like you to come back. We have a relationship with a hospital down the road. We'll give you a CAT scan. And I'm like, hey, no, thanks, buddy. Got on a plane, went back to Florida. The next day, he had a CAT scan, and then the biopsy turned out to be cancer. So I had the lung removed not too long after that. And brother, that's when, like, it was weird. Like, I come out of surgery. I'm down a lung now, and I'm laying there in the hospital bed. You got this weird blanket on you that keeps you warm. It's almost like an inflatable air mattress, but it's hot. And I remember looking at my daughter, who's now a federal agent, by the way. She's a mess. She's like sobbing because she'd never seen me like in that sort of position before, like where I'm just completely helpless. My wife is a mess. And I'm sitting there and I'm like thinking, wow, man, like here I am laying here in this gurney, in the hospital bed at this point. And I'm thinking like about all of these cool cases that I had and all this stuff, and then I'm thinking about all the times I went on vacation with my family, when we went on vacation, we did things where I was like this on the phone, dealing with work-related shit, or on the beach, you're taking a phone call, and I'm like, what an asshole I was, like that I didn't spend the time with the family. It was like, it took all of that stuff that I had been through to get my head out of my ass and say, hey, man, something? I came into this profession whole. I'm going to leave whole. And that's when I finally decided to start talking to people about what I had going into my head. Because, man, you know how it is, brother. If you're into the job, you come home at times, you'll turn on the television, right? You're not even watching the television. You're in your own head so much. And then your wife's calling you or the kids are calling you. They have to call you 3 or 4 times before you snap out of it and say, hey, what's going on? That's where I was. And I was there for a long, long time. So, man, that's why, cops aren't allowed to get PTSD. Yeah, man, we were always taught that, hey, man, I'm the police. I'm the guy that you come to for help. I don't ask for help. Thank God for our military, because it's the folk coming back from war in the recent past that finally started to snap out of it. And the military started to finally address PTSD. And then I think law enforcement is following. But, man, we were way, way behind the curve. And I'm glad we're there now because I feel so much better that I'm acknowledging that, hey, man, it's okay to not be okay. It's not okay to not do anything about it,
Yeah. I think we're still behind the curve a lot. Like, I still, you don't see cops diagnosed with PTSD. The doctor will tell you, like your doctor, like I said, you're a street cop. You do over a decade. You got PTSD. And you could get it just from the shifts alone. Never even mind like what you dealt with or anything like that. It comes in forms. So no. I mean, I appreciate you you telling that story. So what makes you wind up deciding when do you wrap it up with the ATF? When you, like I said, I'm done.
Well, I was in charge of the Miami office when that happened. Parkland Pulse, all that stuff. So it started to get old. Went back up to headquarters. Didn't really want to go to headquarters, but it was a good experience. I mean, I got to oversee the academy was part of like my portfolio. So just to see the young people coming in and I'd go down there 1 week a month. So which was nice. I didn't have to wear a suit because I wear the golf shirt and the 511 pants and just go there and talk to these kids and talk to the staff. It was like invigorating, but with a federal government, you have a 57-year mandatory retirement age. And I'd seen guys reach that age and then like they take your badge and gun on that last day. It's like, hey, thanks for coming. And I've seen people not be able to get jobs after that because you're not working. So I figured, let me go out on my terms. So, in 2001, I popped smoke and went out there and just started looking for jobs. And it's good because, look, man, we all have an expiration date. At some point you got to do things, take care of your family, and the job becomes burdensome. So I got out before I became really bitter, which is nice. But look, the other thing, it's kind of like a double-edged sword because I still really enjoy the law enforcement community. So I stay in touch with them. By now I speak a lot, like at Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, or I'll speak to law enforcement groups about what I went through, kind of the stuff we're talking about today and the importance of making honest, good decisions and taking your lumps when you're making mistakes. So, that's what I'm doing now, is just try to stay busy and connected to the profession by kind of doing what we talked about earlier, by being that old guy, like those old farts from the 4 or 5 squad, passing that knowledge back so that people can, learn from my mistakes, so to speak.
Yeah, no, and you got a second lease on life, right? You get to be the family man that you aren't. When did you write the book, dude? Like when did that come out?
Well, you can't write a book about ATF while you're with ATF. So literally, I started writing the day I left ATF, and it was funny because part of the writing happened. My wife and I took a trip to there's a place in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. It's called the Bavarian Inn. So we went to this place. It's right on the banks of the Potomac River, and started writing there. And my wife was great, man, real supportive. She's like, look, you got to tell the story. Because the weird thing is, like, going back to when I was talking about when I was in charge of training at ATF, we spoke about, hey, man, why don't we teach people what happened? Because I get approached all the time by agents from other states. Like, hey, man, like, what really happened in Phoenix? And I'm like, well, why are you asking? Because we weren't allowed to talk about it. It was like Fight Club rules. We don't talk about Fast and Furious. So that happened a lot. Then I'd have people from other agencies do the same thing. So we were like, hey, man, why don't we put together a training about it so that, hey, there you go, right in, so that it never happens again? Because, you know, brother, the old adage is true. If you don't know about history, you're bound to repeat history. And we would always be told, nope, we're not doing it. DOJ won't allow it. We won't allow it. So I figured, you know what, for the agents that are still there, for the Terry family, for people who want to hear the real story, not the Democrat version or the Republican version, because there was a lot of that shit going on too. It's time to write the book. So I did. It started as a 174,000 word manuscript that I just typed away like a long, boring ass police report. And then finally, somebody gave me the sage advice of, man, you need to bring in an editor or a ghostwriter, which is why Keelan McGregor's name is on the book. She's awesome. She took that and really turned it into something that I think people have said is actually entertaining to read, as opposed to a long, boring police report. And I know you listened to the book. I know it's out there on audiobooks for those people that, you know, don't want to read.
My only critique is I wish it was you doing it.
Yeah, but we need a translator.
I wish it was you, dude, because I know about a lot not doing this now. We always get books. Like everybody, oh, could you read my book? And we'll come on, I'm like, yeah, you know, and the people because like hearing it from you is even more different now too. But I like to, any book that I read, I get the book, but I listen to it too, because that's just how I take in information better by listening to it. I just noticed that about myself. So if I bought your book, that means I bought it twice. You know?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, brother. I'm still trying to make that money back. I paid lawyers. But to Michael's question, yeah, the FBI, same rules. Here's the weird thing. You know, you have to get the agency to look at your book. So, you know, and I knew guys that wrote books in the past, and they get, hey, man, we really going to change this name. We'd like you to change this name, you know, because they're trying to, you know, protect the agency or whatever. The cool thing is when the ATF lawyers looked at my book, they were like, because look, they didn't like what happened either. They're like, hey, man, you might want to check, because your book says that Ken Melson, who was the director at the time, was deposed on July 4th of 2011. That's a holiday. There's no way that happened. Well, it did. It actually did happen. He went there on July 4th because he didn't want to be seen by any government employees. So he figured, let me go there on a holiday. So that was the only critique that ATF lawyers had about the book. Other than that, man, they were like, hey, man, thanks for telling the truth, which is nice.
Yeah. Donahue says the World Trade Center program states 90% of MOS working or with the NYPD on 9/11 have related PTSD and anxiety.
Well, I have no doubt. How could you not?
But nobody's ever been compensated for that either. So that's the other thing, right? No one's ever been officially diagnosed with that in the NYPD as per NYPD medical doctors. And that to me, that's a problem, you know.
They're witch doctors, man. Come on. NYPD medical unit, let's give me a break. Your arm's practically hanging off. Yeah, you're fit for duty. Go back. You know?
So they give you the go ahead. You write the book. The book, for those of you wherever you're watching or listening, the book, the link is in the notes of this show, as well as Pete's LinkedIn, where he's active on social media. Are there any other social media handles you have?
I'm on Instagram, but I don't really do much on there. You know, I mostly just if my kids post something. So, and I'm on Facebook under my name. You know, but yeah, LinkedIn is where I do a lot of my my posting, because look, I have a law enforcement following, and I learn a lot from the folks on LinkedIn, and I try to put some positive stuff up there that folks can learn from some of the things I've seen as well. You know, again, I do miss being part of the law enforcement community, because it's a noble profession, and I loved what we did. You know.
Yeah. So you're a keynote speaker now. Could you just What else you working on, bro? Any big news coming out? Any other things that we're doing? Yeah.
I got my feelers in the water for certain things. You know, there has been some Hollywood interest in the book, and we'll see what happens. You know, but again, it's just
I can play you, bro. I'll play you, but I'll put a wig on for the.
Yeah, Stephen. Yeah, I have a website. It's www.peterjforcelli.com. That's where I can sign a book for you if you're interested.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, definitely check out that book. You're working on a podcast with Tom Joyce. Tell us about that.
Oh yeah. Well, first off, Tommy Joyce is a guy I absolutely love. He's the real deal, and we very frequently talk about ongoing issues. The two of us on the phone, venting, just pontificating, solving the problems of the world. And we decided, why not let some other folks join us for those conversations as well? You know, I mean, look, a couple reasons. One is it's nice to spread our knowledge to other folks. But hey, man, there's a lot of people out there who will teach us a thing or two. We actually filmed the pilot episode last night, and we had the chief of detectives from the Jacksonville Police Department on. What a amazing guy. So, I mean, you know, just the old school chief of detectives. So, I mean, it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to it because like I said, it keeps me in touch with the profession, you know, so it'll be fun.
Yeah, there it is. Ten-Four Tavern. Stories served straight up, sometimes with a twist. They're going to actually be on the Finest Unfiltered. So Finest Unfiltered media platform. So we're excited about that. Yeah, I think it's going to be awesome, dude. I think that, you know, I think people have a lot to learn from you. I know I do. I know Eric feels the same way about you and Tom. And, you know, it's the same thing that we felt for Ron and Rob. Like, you know, there's vital experience. Like if guys in this profession aren't getting the experience by going to work, then they could get experience by going to podcasts or listening to speakers. I mean, I know I learned a lot here today from you, and I appreciate you taking the time and speaking with us and being open with us. Anything that we missed? Anything that you want to talk about before we start to wrap it up?
No, just like I said before, man. I know there's people listening who are probably coping with things, you know. I mean, but look, we're just right now we're in a bad spot as a profession because there's people who want to demonize us unjustifiably. And like I said many times, I even said it yesterday on the podcast: is nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. So don't let people get you down, man. And look, if you're dealing with demons, talk to somebody, man. You know, there's no need to look for permanent solutions to temporary problems. You know what I mean? So take care of yourselves. And look, you can't take care of your family and you can't take care of your people if you don't take care of yourself first. And to your point earlier, man, I turned into a fat, lazy, you know what, after I had the lung removed, because I always operated under hey, man, if I can't bench press a lot of weight, if I can't do things, why bother at all? But for the last few months, I'm back in the gym. So I mean, even getting yourself mentally healthy, it doesn't happen overnight, man. I had the lung surgery in 2018, and I finally got my ass back in the gym. So it's baby steps, you know. But do something good for yourself and for your family, you know.